We now move to theme 3, which is basically about case studies. We've talked a lot about different approaches to calculating economic value of heritage and its value in general. And I think now it's time to show 2 case studies. We tried to pick really difficult case studies, so I hope you really appreciate the persons who will be presenting them. I would like now to ask Ms. Lucie Parra, who represents the French network Grand Site de France.
Hello everyone. I would like to thank you first for inviting me to speak at this very important conference, and I hope you will appreciate my presentation. So the topic today is about heritage and economic development. So as you see, I decided to name my presentation Heritage Leverage for Sustainable Development. It has already been said here today, all the reasons why heritage is so important. So I'll go more into 4 specific examples than in like general. And then I'll give you some recommendations at the end, especially for heritage sites managers. So I come from the Grand Site de France network, which is an association that regroups local authorities managing heritage sites in France. You have the map in here, so nowadays we have 37 members, and these 37 members represent 27 million of visitors every year. So you can see we have quite big touristic pressure. You might recognize some of the pictures here. I put only six sites in here, but what's common to all our members is they're very popular and well-known and represent something in the French identity. And they are all protected by a powerful law dating from the 1930s. But the law for protecting them is not enough in face of the touristic pressure. So this is why you can see the pressure here, automobile visitors, and commercial pressure that's not in phase with the historic and natural heritage, that's the sites. So how did we choose to answer these problems of presentation and preservation not being enough? These sites need to be managed in a sustainable way in order to cope with all these to cope with the attractiveness they have, to cope with the number of visitors they attract. So this is one of my most important slides, the triangle you see here. It's a triangle of balance between the site itself, the visitors, and the inhabitants from the local territory. Because the site and the monument, it has already been said, it's not only the site itself, it has always to be taken in account within the context, within the territory it sits in. So this is what we would like all the sites to be, in balance between the site, its values, the visitors, so that they can come and perceive these values, and the inhabitants that create, in a way, what we call the spirit of the site. And the spirit of the site wouldn't be there if the inhabitants were not there. So the balance is almost never perfect, but it's a goal every site and every monument, either cultural or natural, should try to achieve. So in the 1970s, the French state created this national policy called the Grand Site policy, which tries to work towards the tourism flow management and to allow the sites to be open to the visitors. Because what we don't want to preserve sites and monuments and close them from the public, because we want to share. The heritage is here for all of us, and we are not allowed to close it. But we need to present it in such a way that the heritage itself wouldn't be destroyed by the amounts of visitors coming. If all this balance is present, if the inhabitants and the tourists are included, this can generate an important contribution to the economic but also social development of the area or the region the site is in. And it's very important to work in a partnership with not only public actors, not only inhabitants, but also local economic actors, agricultures, all together in order to preserve and to open these sites to people who wish to visit or live there. So this is a label that has been created in 2003, and it's a label for sites that are managed in a sustainable manner. And what's important about this label, it's not only for UNESCO heritage sites or the most important sites. It can be a small site, but managed in a sustainable manner that can get this label. And it's only for 6 years, and after 6 years, there is an evaluation, and every site that has it has to reapply to have it again and have a project, a long-term project of sustainable development for the site. And nowadays we have 10 sites that have this label, and all the other members of our network are working to obtain it. So now I'll give you 4 examples of good and not so good use of sites in order to achieve economic development or economic benefits, as you will see. So my first example is the Mont Saint-Michel and its bay. The first slide you have here is the vision you all have of Mont Saint-Michel. The little hill, the mount, in the middle of its bay, like a place of pilgrimage, a place everybody tends to go to, but the passage is as important as the goal, which is the abbey at the top of the mount. So that's your dream. Now the reality. Probably some of you have been to the Mont Saint-Michel, and the shock between the fantasy and the reality can be quite rude. You can see pictures down there from the shops. There is only one little street in the Mont Saint-Michel, and most of these shops have very little to do with the local values and spirit of the site. And this is quite a pity because there are 3.5 million visitors going to the Mont Saint-Michel every year, but most of them only for a few hours, and most of them don't go up to the abbey. So the experience of the site is not what it should be. And I really hope this will improve one day, but for the moment this is my, I would say, not so good example of good economic management, because it's not being reinjected into the site. The money that's generated by the site is not being reinjected in it. A better example is the one of Poitevin-Marche, which is in the west of France, and it used to be quite not good as well. Like 10 years ago, it was in a difficult situation because the landscape started to close itself because the agriculture wasn't present anymore. And about 10 years ago, the local authorities and local economic actors and local population started to work together to bring back the landscape and its values, and all together diversify the offer of tourism that they have. Because before, as you see, there is a barge, and most of the tourists only came for like a few hours, did a tour on the barge, and then went away. Today, the barges are used as they used to be in the 19th century to transport cows into the landscape, because many of the parts of the marsh are accessible only by water. So the landscape is open again, and you can see it well, in all its size. And the managing team with the local authorities built an important network of cycling paths, you can see here. And all this together make people stay a week, and it used to be a day and a half a few years ago. And it's the length of the stay that brings the money to the territory. If you stay longer, you will spend much more than if you come only for 3 hours and maybe buy an ice cream and a postcard. My third example, very quickly, is a Puy-Marie. It's a very rural area in France where there was almost no tourism at all. But today, we can see that what tourists want is to have something authentic, not to go in a mass hotel, but to go to something small where you can eat local products, meet local people, and have an authentic experience. And this is a region where local authorities and local populations work really hard to bring this tourism of small scale but good quality tourism based on local identity and local products. My fourth and last example is the Sainte-Victoire. Many of you probably know it through the paintings of Paul Cézanne. You can see here, but that's just the identity for the outside world. And many of the local populations couldn't identify themselves with living in a painting of Paul Cézanne. It was very hard for many of them. And so 20 years ago, there was this big fire, and all the local populations realized that the value of the site is not only in the paintings of Paul Cézanne. It's there, right in front of their noses, the mountain itself. And they created this project with a common goal, which is to preserve, manage, and promote the site in the framework of sustainable development, but on a larger scale than what's the red thing is the protected area, and the blue is all the territory that's included in the project and that works on the project, even if they're not in Sainte-Victoire itself. And what's important is that last year, Sainte-Victoire did a research about the impacts of Sainte-Victoire itself on the local economy. And Sainte-Victoire is a mountain, it's a territory, so you don't pay any entrance fee when you go there. But anyway, the tourism impact is about 60 million euros annually spent on the territory by the tourists that come because of Sainte-Victoire. The ones that come and don't know Sainte-Victoire before coming are not counted in this survey. So it's 60 million euros spent annually, 700 jobs, and 9 million euros on local taxes that get back into the territory. The image and brand value, if you have a company that has Sainte-Victoire in its name, it brings 7 million euros annually to the territory as well. And the real estate value is increased as well because of the name and the notoriety of Sainte-Victoire, and more because people know it's managed in a good way. So now just some conclusions. There are a lot of them, but I'd like to press on a few. Preservation, management, and touristic promotion are always to be in balance in a site. It's very difficult to take only one because it will not work, just simply as that. It's important to have this balance between visitors and locals, and to work with all the people that are concerned by the territory, public, private, people, living, everybody. And as we said, as Mr. Christopher Young said, even if it's hard, and even if we don't know what will happen later, we have to think in the long term. Heritage sites are not attraction parks, and we can expect short-term economic rentability from them. And it should never be our first aim. And we always have to take the side in the whole territory and think local development on a larger scale. And as was already said, the impacts are mostly indirect, so it's difficult sometimes to explain it to somebody who wants to cut the money for the funds for a site, to tell them, well, it's indirect and it's difficult to prove, but it's there. And you have to have this in mind, the long-term viability, and the site will give it back to you if you think in a larger scale and a longer time perspective. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to write me an email, and you have the address. Oh, we don't have it anymore. But yeah, if you have any questions, come to me. And
thank you very much. It was extremely interesting, and I think a case study that is we can quite easily imagine how to adapt it and how to use this model in other places.